undesirable private residence in an area of outstanding natural property device.
Dame Patricia Routledge was adored by millions, yet she lived her life almost entirely out of reach. She never married, never had children, and kept her private world firmly closed. This wasn't an accident, and the reason behind it surprised even those closest to her. Behind the laughter were choices that sparked years of speculation, rumors that followed her to the very end. Now, we finally know how she spent her final years, whether she truly retired, and why she walked away from an unforgettable sitcom when it was at its peak. The rise of Dame Patricia Routledge. For millions of viewers around the world, Dame Patricia Routledge was instantly recognizable. Her voice, her timing, and her unforgettable role in keeping up appearances made her a household name far beyond Britain. She became synonymous with comedy, social satire, and a certain kind of absurdity. But while audiences laughed behind the scenes, Patricia's life was quite different from what it looked like on screen. And years after her most famous role faded from television, long-standing rumors about her private life and career choices began to surface. And after her tragic passing, these rumors are finally being clarified. Patricia Routledge was born in 1929 in Tranmere, Birkenhead, Cheshire, into a modest working-class family. The world she grew up in had little connection to the arts. Acting was not seen as a practical career, especially for a young woman without money or industry ties. Her community valued stability and traditional work, not theater or performance. But from an early age, she showed an interest in language and storytelling, even if the path forward was unclear. She attended Birkenhead High School, where her academic ability stood out, and later went on to study English at the University of Liverpool. It was there, through student drama productions, that she first began performing seriously. These early experiences weren't glamorous, but they were formative. She learned discipline, timing, and how to command attention without spectacle, skills that would define her career decades later. Entering the professional theater world was not easy. Routledge had no family connections and no financial safety net. She relied on scholarships and sheer persistence to move forward. Her acceptance into the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School marked a turning point. The training was demanding and competitive, and she had to adapt quickly to professional standards. Many students around her came from more privileged backgrounds, but she matched them with focus and preparation. After training, work did not come easily. Like many actors of her generation, she spent years in repertory theater and touring companies, taking whatever roles were available. These were long, exhausting seasons with little recognition, but they gave her range. She learned comedy, drama, musical timing, and stage presence the hard way, night after night, in front of unpredictable audiences. The industry she entered was also male-dominated, particularly in the 1950s and 60s. Women were often typecast or sidelined, especially if they didn't fit a narrow idea of glamour. Routledge had to work harder to be taken seriously, especially in dramatic roles. She refused to be boxed in, and that refusal slowly paid off. Her stage work with the Royal Shakespeare Company earned her respect. She proved she could move easily between comedy and drama, classical text, and modern performance. This versatility became her signature. At the same time, she began appearing on television in the 1960s, even though TV was still considered a lesser medium compared to the stage. Balancing both worlds was difficult, but she did it deliberately, refusing to abandon theater prestige or dismiss television's reach. Her international breakthrough came through musical theater. In 1968, she won a Tony Award in New York for Darling of the Day. The win established her beyond Britain and confirmed her status as a performer with global appeal. Even then, She continued fighting typecasting, moving between Shakespeare, musicals, and comedy rather than settling into one lane. But it wasn't until the 1990s that she became a true household name. Keeping Up Appearances introduced the world to Hyacinth Bouquet, a character so specific and memorable that she threatened to overshadow everything else she had done. The role brought fame, but it also carried a risk. Many viewers saw only the comedy and not the depth of her stage career. Still, within the industry, her reputation was firmly established. She was respected as one of Britain's most versatile actresses, someone who had risen from modest beginnings to the highest honors, including a damehood, in recognition of her contributions to drama and charity. But behind that success were personal sacrifices, private losses, and long-standing rumors she never addressed publicly, stories that would only begin to surface much later. The losses that shook her. For all the control and polish Dame Patricia Routledge showed in public, her private life was shaped by loss much earlier than most people realized. Long before she became a familiar face on television, she was already learning how to keep going without the people who mattered most to her. Her father, Isaac Edgar Routledge, was a tailor and haberdasher in Birkenhead. He worked hard, earned modestly, and lived a practical life. There was nothing theatrical about his world, but he believed in education and supported his daughter's ambitions even when acting looked like an uncertain path. Sadly, he died in 1985, when Patricia was in her mid-50s. By then, she was already well established in theater and television, but his death still hit hard. Losing him meant losing the last living link to her early life, the man who had quietly backed her long before awards or recognition came into the picture. From that point on, there was no parental safety net. Whatever came next, she would be facing it alone. This sense of independence had already been forced on her much earlier. Her mother, Catherine Routledge, died in 1957 when Patricia was still in the early stages of her career. At the time, she was working in repertory theater, moving from place to place, taking small roles, and trying to establish herself in an industry that offered no guarantees. Her mother had been a homemaker and, more importantly, the person who encouraged Patricia's love of reading, language, and performance when she was young. Losing her at that stage was devastating. There was no emotional cushion, no familiar place to return to when the work dried up or rejection hit. Patricia had to keep working, keep touring, and keep proving herself while processing grief largely on her own. That loss shaped how she approached life afterward. Friends and colleagues later noted that she didn't talk much about personal pain. She focused on work, she showed up prepared, and she kept her private life private. Then there was her older brother, Kenneth Graham Routledge. He had originally trained as a solicitor before leaving law behind to become an ordained priest. Kenneth played a different role in her life than her parents. He was someone she turned to for advice, perspective, and grounding. He understood responsibility, discipline, and moral purpose, things Patricia deeply respected. Sadly, Kenneth died in 1989, just before Keeping Up Appearances turned her into a household name. The timing made the loss especially painful. Just as her career was about to reach a level of fame she had never experienced before, the person she trusted most for counsel was gone. Without him, Patricia entered the most public phase of her life, without that familiar voice reminding her who she was beyond the work. The success came quickly, and with it came expectations, press attention, and the risk of being reduced to one character. Losing her brother meant navigating all of that without the sibling who had always helped her keep things in perspective. People often described Patricia as private, disciplined, and reserved. But it wasn't an act. It was the result of learning, early on, that grief doesn't stop the world from moving forward. Work still needs to be done. Roles still need to be played. Curtains still go up. Even at the height of her fame, she kept clear boundaries between her public persona and her personal life. She showed up on screen, then disappeared back into a life few people knew much about. She had already lost too much to let the rest of the world inside. And while she rarely spoke openly about grief, its impact showed in how carefully she chose her projects, how committed she was to professionalism, and how little interest she had in celebrity culture. Emotional and professional struggles. Even with a long list of credits and awards, Dame Patricia Routledge's career was never as secure as it looked from the outside. Between major roles, there were stretches where work slowed down, auditions didn't turn into offers, and she quietly wondered what came next. In later interviews, she admitted there were difficult times when roles were scarce and the future felt uncertain. That anxiety never fully disappeared, even as her reputation grew. Unlike many actors who leaned into publicity to stay visible, Patricia went in the opposite direction. She valued privacy and kept her personal life tightly controlled. She didn't attend industry parties often, rarely courted headlines, and avoided oversharing. In an industry that thrives on access and exposure, this sometimes worked against her. Producers and executives didn't always know where she stood, and some mistook her reserve for distance or lack of interest. When she starred as Hyacinth in Keeping Up Appearances, she finally got a taste of worldwide fame. However, it also came with a heavy burden. Audiences loved Hyacinth's exaggerated manners, her social climbing, and her complete lack of self-awareness. The laughter was constant, and the fan response was overwhelming. But behind the scenes, Patricia felt the pressure of being permanently associated with one role. Everywhere she went, people expected Hyacinth, the voice, the gestures, and the catchphrases. And that expectation became exhausting. Patricia had spent decades proving she could handle Shakespeare, opera, and serious drama. She worried that the public and the industry would forget the rest of her work. She enjoyed playing Hyacinth, but she didn't want it to define her entire career. Unsurprisingly, that concern started showing up on set. During the run of Keeping Up Appearances, Patricia became known for questioning material she felt didn't ring true. She reportedly objected to certain scenes or lines she believed pushed the character too far into cartoon territory. When she felt a situation was too unbelievable, she spoke up. Writers Roy Clark and Harold Snowd sometimes had to revise scripts after discussions with her. These moments didn't come from ego. They came from standards. Patricia cared deeply about credibility, even in comedy. She believed humor worked best when it stayed grounded, and she wasn't afraid to push back if she felt that line was being crossed. Still, this occasionally created tension. Production schedules are tight, and rewrites aren't always welcomed. Despite that, the show remained hugely successful, which is why her decision in 1995 shocked almost everyone. At the height of the show's popularity, with strong ratings and international syndication, Patricia chose to walk away. There was no scandal, no firing, no dramatic collapse behind the scenes. It was a choice she made deliberately. Fans were stunned. Many assumed there had been a major disagreement or falling out. Others believed she was pushed out. Speculation spread quickly, but Patricia insisted that the exit was a personal decision made to protect her long-term career rather than chase short-term popularity. But that decision came with consequences. Turning away from such a successful role meant giving up steady visibility and guaranteed work. Some doors opened, others quietly closed. She continued performing on stage, and remained respected within theater circles, but she never returned to the same level of mainstream television fame. And she seemed at peace with that. What often went unnoticed was how much emotional weight came with constantly managing expectations. Fans wanted Hyacinth. Producers wanted reliability. Critics watched closely. Patricia, meanwhile, was trying to protect her identity as a performer who could do more than one thing well. Colleagues described her as disciplined and exacting. She expected professionalism from herself and from those around her. That attitude earned respect, but it also reinforced her reputation as someone who didn't bend easily. In a business built on compromise, that can be isolating. But while her career choices puzzled the public, there was another part of her life that raised even more questions, one she almost never addressed. Why she never got married. One of the questions people asked most about Dame Patricia Routledge had nothing to do with her career at all. It was about her personal life. She never married, she never had children, and for decades she rarely explained why. What's clear is that it wasn't a secret or a scandal. Patricia Routledge openly acknowledged throughout her life that she did not marry. She didn't dodge the question or pretend otherwise. She simply didn't make it a topic of conversation. In an era when actresses were often defined by their relationships, she chose not to offer that part of herself to the public. There's also no record of her pursuing family life in the traditional sense. She never spoke about wanting children. If she had romantic relationships, she kept them entirely private. No public partners, no red carpet appearances, no interviews hinting at love affairs. She drew a firm line between her work and her personal life, and she stuck to it. For Patricia, the theater came first, not as a strategy, but as a reality. She didn't plan to trade one thing for another. She simply gave everything she had to her craft. Rehearsals, tours, performances, late nights, constant travel. That was her routine for decades. Acting wasn't something she fit around a personal life. It was her life. She later admitted that this focus wasn't a carefully mapped decision. It wasn't a case of choosing career over marriage in a dramatic sense. It just happened that way. She once said, "I didn't make a decision not to be married and not to be a mother. Life just turned out like that because my involvement in acting was so total." The work demanded her time, her energy, and her attention, and she gave it willingly. By the time she looked up, she was already deeply committed to a way of living that didn't leave much space for a conventional domestic life. Independence mattered to her. She valued being self-reliant and answerable only to herself. Marriage, especially in the mid-20th century, often came with expectations that didn't appeal to her. Women were expected to step back, compromise professionally, or define themselves through their partners. Patricia wasn't interested in that framework. It's important to remember the era she came up in. She entered the industry at a time when theater and television were dominated by men, and women already had to fight to be taken seriously. Adding the expectations of marriage could easily have complicated that fight. Being single gave her control over her time, her career, her finances, and her decisions, something many women of her generation didn't have. Now and then, she hinted at how she felt about it all. In rare comments, she suggested she had no regrets. She spoke about fulfillment coming from work, from performance, and from the charities she supported. Her sense of purpose didn't depend on a partner or a family structure. It came from doing her job well and doing it on her own terms. What stood out was how calmly she carried that choice. There was no defensiveness, no bitterness, no long explanations. She didn't frame herself as sacrificing anything. She simply lived the life that made sense to her. That decision also reinforced her reputation for privacy. By keeping her personal world off limits, she kept the focus where she wanted it, on the work. Audiences knew her characters inside out, but the woman behind them remained largely unknown. And that was intentional. Still, as the years went on, that privacy began to invite speculation. People started asking different questions. If she never married and had no children, was she lonely later in life? Did she regret keeping so much to herself? Were there things she chose not to share? Those questions grew louder in her later years, especially as rumors began circulating about her final chapter. Clarifying the rumors. After Dame Patricia Routledge passed away on October 3, 2025, at the age of 96, a wave of old rumors resurfaced almost immediately. Stories that had followed her quietly for years suddenly came back into focus, especially claims about how she lived in her final chapter. Many of them painted a picture that simply wasn't true. One of the longest-running rumors suggested she had lived an isolated or estranged life. Because she never married and had no children, some people assumed she must have been alone. That idea gained traction as she appeared less frequently in public during her later years. But those assumptions were based on distance from the spotlight, not distance from people. Another claim that often appeared in headlines was loneliness. Articles and online commentary occasionally implied that her single status meant her later years were spent in solitude. It was an easy narrative for outsiders to lean on, especially since Routledge had always kept her personal life firmly off limits. But people close to her described a very different reality. Following her death, official statements from those representing her estate confirmed that the rumors were false. While announcing her death, her agent said, "We are deeply saddened to confirm the passing of Dame Patricia Routledge, who died peacefully in her sleep this morning, surrounded by love." That simple line directly contradicted years of speculation. She was not abandoned, forgotten, or cut off. She was supported, cared for, and connected to the people and causes that mattered to her, even in her final moments. One reason these rumors lasted so long is because Routledge never tried to correct them while she was alive. She didn't feel the need to explain herself. She believed that her private life didn't require public clarification, and she stayed consistent with that belief until the end. What many people overlooked was how active she remained away from cameras. Routledge was deeply involved in charitable work, particularly with organizations such as the Royal Voluntary Service. She supported causes tied to community care, older people, and public service. Her involvement kept her socially engaged and in regular contact with others well into her later years. She also maintained strong relationships within the theater world. Even after stepping away from regular performance, she stayed connected to colleagues, attended events when possible, and followed new productions closely. People who interacted with her during these years often spoke about her sharp memory, dry humor, and genuine interest in conversation. Health rumors were another issue that followed Dame Patricia for years. Periodically, false reports surfaced claiming she was gravely ill or had already died. Each time, these claims were proven wrong. Either her representatives addressed them or she appeared publicly afterward, quietly disproving the stories without comment. Because Routledge never shared details about her health, speculation filled the gap. But there was no record of her publicly disclosing any major illness. She managed aging privately and with dignity, just as she had managed every other personal matter throughout her career. After her passing in 2025, it became clear how misleading many of the rumors had been. Friends, colleagues, and official statements all pointed to the same conclusion. She lived her final years on her own terms. She chose privacy, not isolation. She chose discretion, not withdrawal. And yet, there was one more question that still lingered for many fans. If she stepped away from the spotlight so deliberately, did Dame Patricia Routledge ever truly officially retire? Or was she simply choosing when to stop? Did Dame Patricia ever retire? For years, fans wondered what really happened to Dame Patricia Routledge after she stepped away from regular television work. After Keeping Up appearances ended and her public appearances became rare, many assumed she had slowly withdrawn from public life altogether. Some even believed she had faded away without explanation. In reality, the truth was far simpler and far more intentional. Following her sitcom fame, Routledge didn't make a big announcement about retiring. There was no farewell tour, no emotional press run, and no final interview spelling out her plans. She just stopped taking on-screen roles. For an actress who had always kept her personal life private, that quiet exit was entirely in character. After her death, her family confirmed that she had, in fact, retired by choice. It wasn't driven by illness, bitterness, or loss of interest. She simply decided that she had reached a point where she no longer wanted the demands that came with television fame. The schedules, the publicity, the repetition, she had done it all, and she felt no need to keep proving herself. Her retirement wasn't about stepping away from acting altogether. According to her agent, Routledge remained deeply passionate about performance, especially live theater. Even after she stopped appearing on screen, she continued attending plays, keeping up with new productions, and supporting the theater community. Her agent's statement read, "Even at 96 years old, Dame Patricia's passion for her work and for connecting with live audiences never waned, just as new generations of audiences have continued to find her through her beloved television roles. She will be dearly missed by those closest to her and by her devoted admirers around the world." It's clear Patricia still cared about audiences. She just didn't want to be in front of cameras anymore. That distinction is important. Many people assumed she left because she was tired of acting. That wasn't the case. What she stepped away from was visibility, not creativity. Television had given her global recognition, but theater had always been where she felt most at home. Sitting in an audience, watching performers work through live moments, still excited her. Friends and colleagues later said she followed theater closely and spoke about performances with the same sharp attention she had always shown. She never lost her interest in timing, delivery, or storytelling. The love for the craft stayed. The spotlight did not. This is where public perception drifted from reality. Because Routledge wasn't seen, people assumed she had disappeared. But she hadn't vanished. She had simply shifted focus. She chose a quieter life that still kept her connected to the arts without requiring her to participate in the machinery of fame. That decision also protected how she wanted to be remembered. By stepping away on her own terms, she avoided becoming defined by nostalgia or overexposure. Her work stood on its own, without the pressure of trying to recreate past success. Still, one final question continues to linger in the minds of many fans. If she chose to leave television so deliberately, did she ever regret walking away from the role that made her famous? Did she regret leaving the show? After Keeping Up appearances ended, one question followed Dame Patricia Routledge everywhere, even though she rarely addressed it directly. Did she regret leaving the show that made her world famous? Fans loved Hyacinth so much that many couldn't imagine why anyone would willingly walk away from that level of success. Rumors filled the gap. Some suggested she felt trapped by the character. Others claimed she later wished she had stayed longer, especially as the role continued to gain new audiences through repeats around the world. The idea that she might have regretted leaving became part of the show's afterlife, repeated often enough to sound believable. Patricia herself admitted that the period after the sitcom ended wasn't entirely smooth. Audiences strongly associated her with Hyacinth, and that made moving forward complicated. When people saw her, they expected the voice, the mannerisms, and the comedy. The serious stage work she returned to didn't always get the attention it deserved at first. That adjustment brought uncertainty, and she never denied that. But uncertainty didn't mean regret. Whenever she did speak about the role, she was clear about one thing: she did not regret playing Hyacinth. She understood exactly what the character had given her. The show brought her international recognition, financial security, and a place in television history. She respected the role and never dismissed its importance in her career. More importantly, she was also clear that ending the show was her decision. She didn't drift away. She didn't get pushed out. She chose to stop. In her own words, "I brought it to an end," which, of course, the BBC didn't care for very much. "I thought the writer was beginning to recycle old ideas." And also, remembering the glorious Ronnie Barker, he always stopped when he was at the height of something. And he always left with people saying, "Oh, aren't you doing any more?" Rather than people saying, "Is that still on?" That's the place to be, really. And I had other adventures to explore. I'm an actress, and I wanted to take on the stories of other people. Her reason was simple and practical. She believed comedy worked best when it stayed sharp, and she didn't want Hyacinth to turn into a tired version of herself. She also wanted space to try other things. Theater, music, and different kinds of roles still interested her, and she wasn't ready to spend the rest of her career doing only one thing. So while fans continued to speculate, her own position never changed. She acknowledged the challenges that came after, but she stood by her choice. The role defined a chapter of her life, not her entire identity. And leaving it behind was not a mistake she looked back on. It was a decision she made deliberately, knowing exactly what she was doing. Do you think Dame Patricia made the right choice by leaving the show? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen.